Coming up on Bridge City News, Phase 3 clinical trials began today for drug giant Moderna's experimental COVID-19 vaccine. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney visited our region over the weekend to announce millions of dollars more to support addiction recovery centres in southern Alberta. And we get a glimpse into the work Samaritan's Purse is doing to rebuild churches in South America.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The province announced that over the past few days, there have been 304 new cases of COVID-19. That includes 102 cases in Lethbridge, with the most, 45, being on the west side. Our city has also had 2 confirmed COVID-19 deaths, the first in our city since the pandemic began. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says there are now 1,430 active cases across Alberta. Hinshaw says they continue to identify high numbers across the province.
We identified 110 new cases on Friday, 103 on Saturday, and 91 on Sunday. Almost 28,000 tests have been conducted since Friday, meaning there have now been over 651,000 tests completed across the province. Currently, 88 people are in hospital, including 17 in intensive care. Sadly, I must report that 8 more Albertans have died. These deaths were all reported to Alberta Health since Friday, and all but one occurred in the last 4 days.
There's been talk at various councils around Alberta about potentially following Calgary's lead and making wearing masks mandatory indoors in public spaces. The bylaw in the Stampede City comes into effect on August 1st. Now today at Lethbridge City Council, the discussion was more on having all transit riders wearing masks on Lethbridge Transit effective August 4th. During the council meeting today, the mayor said that wearing of masks has been shown to be an effective way of slowing community transmission of COVID-19. Transit riders would be expected to provide their own masks, but if someone doesn't have one, one would be provided for them. In addition, City Manager Craig Dalton will investigate the mandatory use of masks in all City of Lethbridge facilities and public areas. Lethbridge City Council discussed the development of a new provincial drug court and how soon our city may actually see one. Drug treatment courts are specialized courts designed to reduce substance abuse and crime through community rehabilitation.
These are the individuals who are looking at a substantial jail sentence for crimes they are committing as a result of their drug addiction. And when the defense puts their name forward to the Crown clears them, and then they go forward to your community service provider who will support the courts. This is an intensive program. Judicial supervision is ongoing. They're supervised by probation, and they report to the judge on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, whatever the courts determine is needed. We know that on average, about 70 to 73% of graduates have not had new criminal convictions. Drug courts have been operating nationally for over 30 years. This is not a new concept. It's a concept that works, and it's a concept that it has a huge impact on a community. So for Lethbridge to be awarded one of the cities that is going to have a drug court, I think it's an honor.
The Lethbridge Drug Treatment Court will be one of 7 in the province. The hope is to get it all started as early as this fall. It's funded by Alberta Justice and the Solicitor General. All 7 drug courts will cost the province around $20 million per year. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney and Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions Jason Lewan were in standoff over the weekend. The province announced a $10 million capital investment. The funding will support 2 new addiction recovery centres in southern Alberta as part of our province's recovery plan.
Handing somebody who's deep in addiction a needle is not a continuum of care. I don't even think it's terribly compassionate simply to facilitate an addiction rather than to offer a full spectrum of services for recovery and lifetime treatment. That's the approach that we are taking. So we believe this is the continuum of care approach. It is the compassionate approach. It's the approach that will save lives.
What you see today and in coming months is just unfolding of a new chapter. So when Premier talk about the full continuum care, it's not just what you hear here today. Today is the beginning, but with a laser focus. It's about getting people out of addiction. We're going to realign the system. We're going to make it very intentional. When you use taxpayers' money, when we use taxpayers' money, we have a mission. The mission is getting them to be healthier.
Today we're hitting the reset button. I thank the Premier, I thank the Government of Alberta, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Lethbridge is the center of a lot of the resources that are needed for those struggling with addiction. The announcements today are a new way of doing things. As I said, we're hitting the reset button. We're going to do things differently. We're going to work with our regional partners. We're going to work with the folks in Fort Macleod, the folks in Lethbridge County, the folks right here on the Blood Reserve.
Tourism is one of the hardest hit industries during the coronavirus pandemic. Hotels, restaurants, and city attractions have struggled in a big way. Jasmine Sangria says she's aware of this challenge and ready to take on the role of CEO for Tourism Lethbridge.
Tourism Lethbridge is in a really unique position to contribute to broader economic efforts and help recover tourism in Alberta as a whole. The great thing about having COVID happening right now and being joining Tourism Lethbridge is the fact that everyone is feeling unsafe. Everyone is into staycations. People don't want to travel by air. And Tourism Lethbridge has so much to offer. We're 2 hours away from Calgary. Perfect road trip. There's so much to see and do outdoors, the national parks, the gardens, Stampede. There's lots you can do outdoors while social distancing, while staying safe.
Sangria is currently in the Yukon and will start her new role with Tourism Lethbridge in August. Environment Canada has issued a heat warning for much of southern Alberta. Temperatures 29 degrees and above are expected for the week. David Bishop, chairman of Alberta Barley, says that with the hot weather combined with rainfall earlier this month, that means farmers could be harvesting early.
We've actually looking like we're going to produce a average or above average crop this year, and so we haven't had that in a few years, so everybody is looking forward to this year's harvest to actually see what we do get. I mean, we're still not there yet. We could have a weather event of some sort, like a big hailstorm that could wipe us out. That still can happen, but as we get closer to harvest, we're getting more excited about it. As farmers, we always look positively, most of us, at whatever the conditions are. We don't control the weather. Mother Nature does that, so we have to be looking at what we get and what we can produce, and that's how we kind of look at it year to year. So this year we got a big smile on our face. Last year, we were maybe a little grumpier.
Lethbridge Mitsubishi hosted a by-donation car wash and barbecue over the weekend in support of Streets Alive mission. We spoke with folks at the fundraiser who expressed their gratitude for the dealership, supporters of the event, and the nonprofit group.
Well, when we heard about Mitsubishi doing the car wash for Streets Alive, we just thought what a wonderful opportunity to come down and support Streets Alive. And we would like to thank Mitsubishi for putting up their staff to wash cars to support such a great event like Streets Alive, because it's a local business and we need all the support we can get for all these different activities that are happening out here.
With COVID and everything like that, it's been really hard to be able to do sponsorships with charities and things that we'd like to be doing. So we got together with Ali from Streets Alive and we just decided what we could do, what we can do. So just do a barbecue, car wash, spend our time versus the, everything else. And then it's good for the community, it's good for us, and gets everybody outside too. So it's nice.
I just want to put a shout out to all the people out there that are coming down and getting their car washed and supporting this thing and getting some hamburgers and stuff, how much we really appreciate all you guys who have been longtime supporters of us. We are so happy and so grateful, and we're very blessed to have all you guys in our lives. So big, huge thank you from Streets Alive to all of you guys.
The operator of a campground northwest of Calgary says a storm that felled a tree onto a tent on Friday, injuring 3 teenagers, also knocked down up to 40 other trees. Dwayne Needham, who operates the campground for Rocky View County, says hail was so intense he could not even see the campground from the store he runs. A spokesperson with EMS says one of the teens was seriously hurt and taken to hospital when the tree landed on their tent. A young man who drowned in BC last week has been identified as a junior football league player who played for the Edmonton Huskies. Social media posts from a family member say 22-year-old Nathan Falido drowned in the Shuswap Lake. Falido also played in the Canadian Junior Football League in Langford, BC for the West Shore Rebels. The University of Calgary, calling Falido an outstanding player, said it had been recruiting him for the school's football team. There's still no sign of a man who went into the North Saskatchewan River in Banff National Park on Saturday. The man and 2 friends had stopped for a photo next to the river along the Glacier Lake Trail. Parks Canada is working with police in Lake Louise on a search and rescue operation. As of late last night, the man had not yet been located. Officials with the Edmonton Oilers and Indigenous leaders held a pipe ceremony outside of Rogers Place as the NHL season is about to get underway. Inside the fence, picnic tables and a basketball hoop were set up along with food trucks to welcome NHLers who arrived over the weekend. Chief Wilton Littlechild says the ceremony was special because it gave the leaders a chance to welcome hockey and the world to Treaty 6 territory. The Commons Finance Committee has been meeting to discuss details of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's appearance to answer questions about the WE scandal. Both Trudeau and his Chief of Staff have agreed to speak on Thursday. They will face questions over the aborted deal with the organization to run a $912 million student volunteer program. Both Trudeau and Finance Minister Bill Morneau have family ties to the organization, and both are being investigated by the Federal Ethics Commissioner. The law extending Ottawa's emergency wage subsidy for employers hit hard by COVID-19 has passed in the Senate. The package passed by the House of Commons earlier also includes one-time payments for people with disabilities facing higher expenses. Bill C-20 passed on a voice vote without changes. The extension is part of the Liberals' plan to help the economy get back into shape through the fall. The Trudeau government is being pressed to come up with a made-in-Canada COVID-19 vaccine. Healthcare professionals have written to Ottawa asking government officials to look into a $35 million proposal submitted in April from Toronto-based Providence Therapeutics. The company says it wants to begin human trials after finding an effective vaccine on animals. They attribute the government's slowness to a public policy problem and a reluctance to partner with pharmaceutical and biotech companies. Phase 3 clinical trials began today in the United States for drug giant Moderna's experimental COVID-19 vaccine. The company's chairman says researchers want to see if the vaccine kills the virus once it enters the body. They're also trying to determine if the vaccine could prevent someone from even contracting the virus in the first place. The phase testing involves around 30,000 volunteers. The fence protecting a federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon is a dividing line between radically different worldviews. The demonstrators outside and the federal agents inside deal with the same mayhem, but as we hear in this next report, their experiences could not be more different.
Drummers beat out entrancing rhythms. Hundreds dance joyfully as the sun sets in Portland, Oregon. But as night falls, the march to the federal courthouse begins and the mood shifts. The fence protecting the federal courthouse from nightly assault by protesters is a stark dividing line between two radically different worldviews. Associated Press journalists spent the weekend both outside and inside the courthouse, documenting the chaotic fight that has become a centerpiece of the protest movement gripping America. Over 2 nights, thousands of demonstrators outside and dozens of federal agents hunkered down inside traversed the same hours of mayhem just feet apart from each other. But their experience couldn't be more different. To the protesters, the men inside are at best political minions, at worst murderous henchmen.
Using chemical warfare on civilians is anything but protecting and serving, which is what they're supposed to be doing.
But to the agents, the demonstrators each night are violent anarchists bent on hurting or even killing federal agents just trying to do their job.
There are individuals within the crowd who are agitators, anarchists, individuals who aren't here protesting what happened to Mr. Floyd or the push for racial justice. They are just here to attack law enforcement.
The chaos in Portland spread this weekend to other cities as the nation reels amid divisions and a pandemic. When federal agents in Portland finally left the courthouse, they came with force. People scattered as tear gas choked the air. With the battle finally over, agents and demonstrators gathered their things and left to get some sleep. By nightfall, both will be back. Krista Fourier, Associated Press.
Samaritan's Purse continues to help build places of worship for believers in remote areas of Bolivia. After 4 months of having to put down their tools during the lockdown, one worker, Grace Wright, returned to a village to see how their work is developing on a local church there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace, and I am here at our SP Bolivia office. It's been about 4 months since we've been able to go into the field and do our regular programming. So our team is there for the first time after all of these restrictions for COVID. So we are excited to go. Got my mask, I'm ready. Got my team, and we're on our way. Woo. So we have arrived at the church here in Tlahuapalca. Last year we had a construction team come and help do the build. So last time I was here, there was just, wow! We just had like barely the framing of the roof, and now look! Oh my gosh! Eso, ahí va mi codo. Ya con el pastor de la iglesia. Okay, right here where the pastor and I are standing on this very ground is where me and a team of 6 other individuals, they were international volunteers, came, and we mixed cement, we moved brick and sand up this hill back here. It's amazing to be back and see the progress that they've made. That is about it for the day. We're gonna head back to the city, but I'm so thankful to get to see Pastor Sebastian again, see the church completed. I would just ask that you continue to lift up Bolivia in prayers, our staff here, as well as we continue to spread the love and hope of Jesus Christ during this difficult time. May God bless you. Thanks.
That's so nice to see. Also nice to see lots of the hot sunshine across southwestern Alberta again today. Keep that sunscreen close by. Lots of sunny skies and even hotter temperatures for the rest of the week. Complete weather details are coming up. It was another beautiful day in Lethbridge and across southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the forecast. Jeanette, for farmers who've been praying for sunshine, their prayers will be answered this week.
Yeah, certainly the highest temperatures that we have seen so far this year, that's going to be coming up this week, including some heat wave watches as well for southern and central Alberta. I will get to that in just a minute. Overnight tonight, we're going to see clear skies. 13 degrees is our overnight low. A light wind of 20 kilometers per hour. That's considered a light breeze here in Lethbridge. And into tomorrow, we're going to see 33 degrees with lots of sunshine. With the humidex, it's going to be a little bit warmer. The UV index is high, 9. So get out your sunscreen. It's going to be hot. It's going to be sunny. And then our overnight low tomorrow evening, 15 degrees. And then as we get into the 5-day forecast, we're going to see much the same. Look at those temperatures climbing to 33 degrees for Wednesday. Sunny skies all week pretty much here. Thursday, 31. Same thing for Friday under sunshine. And as we get into the weekend, Saturday's high 33 and 32 on Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud for both of those days. So as I said, high temperatures, drink plenty of water. It's going to be hot. According to the almanac, the averages for this time of year, average high 26. So we're certainly climbing higher than that. The average low for this time of year, 11. Our high temperature on this day was back in 1939. It was 37 degrees, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get that high soon enough, especially with the humidity. It could feel that high, certainly. 5 degrees was our low temperature back on this day in 1997. The sunrise this morning was at 5:56 a.m. and our evening sunset 9:20 p.m. Now, as we take a look at what's happening across the country, we're going to see a lot of heat and a lot of sunshine, including on the west coast. Victoria, 22 degrees, 24 expected in Vancouver tomorrow. Now, as I was saying before, this whole area between Edmonton and Calgary, high heat warnings, including that entire corridor in between there. Drumheller, Brooks, Okotoks, Leduc, all of that area has been under a high heat watch. So watch out for that. It's probably going to continue into this week. Same thing for Saskatchewan. Lots of sunshine, 30 degrees expected in Saskatoon and Regina. Winnipeg's high 27 under sunny skies. Toronto's high 28. They could see some showers there with a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. Sunshine expected tomorrow in Ottawa, 29 degrees, 30 expected for Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. That area also was under high heat warnings today. Same with Fredericton, and that humidity building up into a possibility of a thunderstorm tonight and into tomorrow. High 29 over there in Fredericton. 28 expected in Charlottetown. Same thing for them with the thunderstorm watch. Halifax, lots of sunshine. 29 is their high and a 60% chance of showers throughout the day. tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 16 degrees. So there you go. That is your weather. It's going to be hot this week. Drink plenty of water. Stay cool. There you go.
Gold prices have soared to a record high, with investors finding safe places to park their money as concerns grow over the COVID-19 impact on the global economy. Gold hit $1,944 an ounce earlier today, beating its previous record of $1,921 set in 2011. Gold has now gained about 27% so far this year. Silver also received a boost, climbing by more than 6% to reach over $24 an ounce, eclipsing a 7-year high. We will have today's closing prices coming up in just a few moments. The province's Suncor is facing 7 environmental charges for an incident alleged to have occurred 2 years ago at its refinery in Strathcona County near Edmonton. The government says the charges are for allegedly contravening a term or condition of an approval. It says the company is also charged with releasing a substance into the environment that may cause an adverse effect and for failing to report the release in a timely manner. The company is scheduled to appear in court on Wednesday. Mitsubishi Motors has reported a loss of $1.7 billion US in the April to June quarter. It is also forecasting more red ink as COVID-19 slammed auto demand around the globe. The Japanese automaker reports that quarterly sales shrank 57% to around $2.2 billion. Mitsubishi is promising a turnaround, pursuing growth in Southeast Asian markets and building on its strength in four-wheel drives. Large numbers of people seeking to escape the coronavirus are finding solace on the open water. Now, that's good news for the boating industry. The Marine Retailers Association of America says a recent survey shows 70% of boat dealers are either completely out of boats or running low on inventory. Across the U.S. and in many boat retailers in Canada, boat dealers are reporting unprecedented sales. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 164 points on the day to finish at 16,161. The Dow was up 114 to 26,584. The S&P 500 was up 23 points to 3239, and the Nasdaq was up 173 to finish at 10,536. Oil was up 31 cents on the day to $41.60 per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to $1.73. Gold was up 5 cents to $1942.29 an ounce, and silver was down a cent to finish at $24.58 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton, barley's at $247, canola's at $4.89, and corn is at $233 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 90 cents to $100.43. Feeder cattle were down $2.70 to $139.35, and lean hogs were up 55 cents to $54.55. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to $74.84 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney and Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions Jason Lewan were in standoff over the weekend. The province announced a $10 million capital investment. The funding will support 2 new addiction recovery centres in southern Alberta as part of our province's recovery plan. So you're in the market for both a new vehicle and a new home. Which one should you buy first? Real estate broker Courtney Atkinson explains which one you should pursue in an interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up next.
Prior to the pandemic, the Alberta economy was already going through some tough times, but how has COVID-19 affected the real estate market? Joining me now over Skype is Courtney Atkinson, a Lethbridge real estate broker with Atkinson and Associates. Courtney, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So please tell us, what is the southern Alberta real estate market looking like these days with all this COVID craziness going on? I would imagine overall sales have been probably less than they were prior to lockdown.
Yeah, we saw a fairly dramatic change in attitudes and real estate volume by about March. We were actually trending to have a very good year from a sales standpoint. So in January and February, we were up 5% and 10% respectively. And then things started trailing off as soon as the announcements were made that the COVID was a real thing and it was having a real impact. And so we did see a pretty good dip through March and April for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, have people been afraid to purchase or even look at homes because of COVID? Or are you finding that it's just kind of business as usual? Those who want to buy a house are just willing to get out there and, look at houses?
Yeah, I would say that in March, there was a high degree of caution across the board. Everybody was really, really worried, and there was a lot of news feeds just really heavy with news about COVID. And I think it was really overwhelming for all of us. None of us really knew what to expect. None of us knew what the economy would look like in 4 to 6 weeks. And there was a lot of information, and I think it was just overload. And so that manifested through March being fairly quiet. And in real estate, those statistics will show up the following month. And so what that meant was that very few offers were written or received in March. And that meant that by April, we had about 50% fewer transactions happening than we did back in 2019 March. So there was certainly a significant change that happened in that period of time, but we're actually swinging back up. Like even in May right now, when you look back year over year, we're only down 25%, and the trend is looking really good for June. So it's almost as if the nerves that people had in March have kind of worked their way through, and people are feeling good again and starting to realize that, hey, listen, you know what? Our government's done a great job at social distancing and having programs in place to encourage us to be responsible. And now we're kind of seeing the fruits of those labors, I think. We really paid the price, I think, in March, and now we're starting to see that pay off.
For sure. I was actually going to ask you too, since some of the restrictions have been lifted a little bit the past month or so, and particularly even like into this week, are you finding that people are feeling a little bit more braver now to get out there?
I would say so. When we first had the announcement made in March, like everybody, we implemented policies and procedures that would help protect our families and the families of our clients. And it was high alert. There's no question about it. I think everybody in the industry was very worried, and we weren't sure what that would look like. And so were all of our clients. Now that we've been through that and we've kind of heard the news load lighten a little bit and our caseload in Alberta lighten a little bit, and indeed in Canada, I think the attitudes of people have lightened and kind of, and certainly spring helps too, having the fresh air and getting people outside tends to be a little bit more kind of encouraging. And so, yeah, I would say the attitudes have changed. People have loosened up. We're seeing fewer people concerned about what the protocol is, fewer questions about how we're navigating the process. And I would say now the shift has been that it's more our elderly clients, folks that would have justifiable reasons for being more concerned, whether they're immunocompromised or, they're elderly. They want to know exactly what we're doing to protect them. And it's our duty to have those systems in place for sure, all across the industry. In many markets across North America, real estate was not deemed an essential service. And the feedback was that the market really wanted that. There were still a number of people that wanted to buy and sell, but for whatever reason, the governments were not allowing it. So we're very fortunate in that respect. And I think it's paid good dividends in our market. We're seeing it rebound quite nicely.
Yeah. So what kind of restrictions were you putting in place? And like right now you're saying the seniors are mostly the ones that are concerned about that. What sort of things are you doing for them for safety?
Yeah, for our team, there were a few protocols that we implemented, and a lot of it we had already had in place. So much of what we do is virtually because of the nature of our office structure. We have offices across southern Alberta, so we meet a lot virtually anyway. And we've had virtual tour technology with our company for a long time. And so it really just meant that we were making sure that any prospective buyers had reviewed all of our virtual tours, that they'd reviewed all the photographs, that they had all the information about the property. And then for showings, we were limiting them to one person with one realtor, and they were expected to wash their hands in the property, wash their hands as they were leaving the property. Some were opting to wear masks, although that wasn't part of our protocol. At that time, it wasn't really something that was generally accepted to be beneficial, so we didn't implement that. But now for our clients that do prefer that, we certainly do. And the main thing is just maintaining that social distance and making sure that we're limiting as much exposure to people's properties as we can. And for those that want to go ahead and make an offer on a property, of course, there's other stakeholders that want to be involved. And if it's the property that they intend to move on, then we're okay letting a few more people in. And most sellers were okay with that too. They just didn't want open houses and that sort of thing. We're still not permitted to do open houses. So
yeah, that was actually one of my questions. I was wondering are you still holding open houses? And also, has this affected, or did you see mostly in the springtime, people not putting their houses on market as much because they don't necessarily want a bunch of strangers, traipsing through their house? Did you find that at all?
Yeah, good question. I think to address the first part of that, with the open houses, it wasn't a major concern for us. In fact, we were happy that was the case. It limited exposure. and really caused us to be able to meet people who were very interested in particular properties, and then gave us an opportunity to very carefully mitigate risk for the sellers that we represent. And then on the other side of things, I think that the other folks that were, attempting to list their properties and were thinking about what they were going to do in the spring, I would say that there was a fair chunk of them that were deferring through that March timeframe. But the interesting thing that happened is that when they did hit the market, we were seeing uptake happen really quickly. We were seeing a lot of competitive offers, a lot of multiple offers, a lot of really strong offers coming to the table. So it was almost like there was pent-up demand in the buyer side that wasn't being met by sellers. So when they finally realized that there was still opportunity, I think they were met with enthusiasm and encouragement. So it was good news.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, I'm just wondering, how helpful was the use of your technology? Like you were saying, you kind of used that a little bit, but for example, like using a drone, for example, to do like a virtual tour or anything, was that really being utilized more so than normal?
Well, I wouldn't say more so than normal for us, because we do that with all of our listings. So the virtual tours, the aerial photography, professional interiors and exteriors, that's just part of our program. I would say across the industry, the access and the requirement and the expectation that the market would have for those things certainly went up. I would say one of the most interesting things for us was that, we had been meeting by Zoom or Google Hangouts as a company for a long time. And the thing that we really noticed, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of your viewers, we were just really missing each other. Like as a company, we really just missed seeing each other around the office and doing our work together. And despite seeing one another on a computer screen, we were just starting to feel like, oh my gosh, when is this going to get over? And I think collectively as a community, a lot of that happened at the same time. We were keen to get back to work and see one another. Folks were keen to get out and see properties. They were keen to get moved again. And so I think collectively, it's almost like we all had these same feelings at the same time, and the market started picking up again.
I think you're right. I think there's that pent-up energy. People are just tired of being at home. So now you're an essential service, but you're saying your office actually was closed. You guys were working from home for the most part, other than when you were showing homes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we had to stay open for cashing checks for deposits and things like that. So we would typically have somebody coming by the office twice a day to look after those types of things, offers and that sort of thing. But we were completely virtual, and we can conduct ourselves virtually fairly simply. We've done that for a long time. So it wasn't a real shift for us. It wasn't like we had to figure out how to operate our business without a building. It was just frankly that we're so collegial, like many people in the industry. We just wanted to see one another, and we missed the client engagement too, right? And so, yeah, you're right. It was so nice to get back out and see people in the community. And I just think personally, there were days that went by where I was working from home and I didn't even leave the house. Like that's not healthy, right? And I think collectively as a community, we all realized that hey, listen, you know what? There is a risk out there and it is serious, but at the same time, so is our mental and physical health, and we need to look after those things too.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you had mentioned earlier that you recently have gotten some really strong offers. So does that mean that home values have not necessarily declined? Have they increased since the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't say that. We've been in a fairly balanced or buyer's market since about 2010. As you well know, Alberta's had a tough time through many changes over the last decade with oil prices and difficulties with our economy. And that's manifested in real estate prices not appreciating in any real measurable way here in Southern Alberta in that time frame. That said, one of the fears that a lot of our sellers had in the beginning, back in March, was that there would be a dramatic depreciation in property values in a very near term. And that really didn't show up for us. We're seeing properties transact at approximately the same prices that they would have earlier in the spring. I think that competitiveness in the marketplace and those multiple offers was more a matter of demand, buyers kind of anxiously waiting for sellers to put this, right property up on the market and then acting very quickly. But that didn't necessarily have a change on prices.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So, Courtney, what is the average home price now in Lethbridge?
Yeah, so we're about $285 when you look across Southern Alberta, Lethbridge specifically, and that's been fairly consistent for a while. One of the things that skews the average house price in a market will tend to be the number of properties that are sold above the average and below the average. So I think what we're going to see this year, if we kind of try to predict how things are going to go, and this is also related to some of the mortgage changes that happened through the B20 legislation and some of the things that have just recently come out. We'll likely see some of the more expensive properties stagnate a little bit, possibly not transact, and maybe those folks withdraw from the market. So that could potentially just pull that statistic down a little bit. It's not necessarily reflective of the overall values in our marketplace. It just means that there's not as much uptake of those listings, let's say in the 5, 6, or 800,000 range. And not to say that they don't sell, but the volume of those particular type of listings in a year like this might not be as high as it was last year, for example.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So you mentioned 285 is about the average price, but what price range is selling the most currently?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of activity once you get up to about $350,000. Once you go above that, it does slow down a little bit. And we've sold properties, well north of that. I mean, we've sold a couple properties over $1 million already this year. So those properties are transacting. It's just the volume of them isn't quite what it might have been in another year. So right up to about 350, I would say there's good action, and then it kind of tapers off a little bit after that. You just got to adjust your expectations in terms of the time on market and how long it might take to find an attracted buyer if you're listing, say, a $500,000 or $600,000 house.
Interesting. And what are where are the interest rates headed these days?
Yeah, great question also. So interest rates are right around 3% plus or minus, depending on a few different variables. They're again all-time low. In times like this, the government's motivated to keep money in the markets. They want to keep people spending. They want to make sure that there's some liquidity out there. And so they're making money accessible to people. And as you know, there's lots of programs for businesses and for families to kind of keep people afloat during these difficult times. And they want to make sure that mortgages are affordable as well. Now, there's a little bit of shyness out there in terms of the qualification criterion. So they've tightened up in some of those ways a little bit just to make sure that they're doing additional income verification, making sure that people are still employed, even though they might have been laid off for a little while. So they're doing extra due diligence. But indeed, the prices of mortgage rates are incredible. So we're saying to everybody, hey, listen, if you're secure in your position and you're thinking about making a move, I know every realtor says this all the time, but really money's never been cheaper. So it is a great opportunity for that.
That's interesting. So what advice would you have for, like, say, a young couple trying to get things together to buy their first home? What do they need to do to get things in place financially?
One of the most important things that a person can do is just save. I think in our society, we're so drawn by things that we see on Facebook and Instagram, and you can buy pretty well anything with a couple touches of your phone on Amazon, and it's so easy to spend money. And I think collectively as a society, we've really gotten away from saving. And so one of my personal hopes that this pandemic has brought on, at least in my hope, is that it'll create a generation of savers. And so my advice to any young person is to make sure that you're saving 10, 15% of your income, put it away, just pretend that it doesn't exist, save that money. It might take you a year to save up money to buy your first home, but it is one of the best investments. And even if we're not in a market where properties are appreciating dramatically, the fact is that it's still substantially cheaper than renting, and you've got a place to call home forevermore. And it can begin one of those things that sets you up for a very successful life and a successful retirement. So we're big advocates of that. And I think one of the other small pieces that people don't realize, especially when they're younger, they'll begin that saving process and they'll start to feel that they've got some cash in the bank and they feel really encouraged by that. So then they go out and buy a quad or buy a truck or a boat or something. And of course, those things have a dramatic impact on your ability to qualify for the mortgage when the time comes. So what we say is, buy your boat the day after you take possession of your house. You want that new truck? Just wait till the day after you've moved into your house. It's much easier to get financing on a new vehicle than it is to get financing on a mortgage. So just defer those big purchases until after you've already taken possession, because you'll still get qualified, but it might not work the other way around.
Wow, that is great advice. Thank you so much for that. Courtney, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Take good care.
That is Courtney Atkinson, real estate broker with Atkinson and Associates here in Lethbridge.
We only have one shot at this life. The reality is some people succeed while other people fail. What is it that makes the difference? Dr. Paul Brownback is author of How to Succeed as CEO of Your Life. Dr. Brownback, Thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Dr. Brownback, what inspired you to write this book, CEO of Your Life?
Well, I spent a lot of years, Hal, just drifting through life, not really focusing on being effective in what I did. And as a result, I wasted a lot of time, a lot of years, lost a lot of opportunity. And looking back, I just didn't want other people to have that experience. And so I wrote this book to help people to not make that mistake.
Now, you're right about that succeeding at life represents our most important objective. How would you define success?
Well, Jesus defined that for us. He gave us the first and second commandments, to love God and to love our neighbor. Then he gave us a new commandment, which tells us to love one another. So success is determined by showing agape to other people. And agape love is just seeking their best interest, seeking to benefit them. And as we maximize the production of agape with our life, that is what brings success. God created us to be agape producing organisms. That's our purpose. That's what he designed us to do. And as we fulfill that design, as we use our life to maximize that production of agape, then we will achieve success.
You know, some people say the real ideal of success is the fact, or by gauging success, is how many people finish with the most amount of toys.
Oh, yes.
You know, so how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of people finish that way, and they finish with a lot of misery, and they didn't leave behind a very great legacy. And as they look toward eternity, they don't have much there either.
Now, why do you say we cannot escape responsibility for our lives?
We are born into this life. God has given us resources, and we have a responsibility to God to use those resources to be productive to the maximum for him. And there's no way to escape that. And especially when we become believers, God calls us as believers to be good stewards of the resources he's given us. So there's no way out of that. That's a responsibility either we can meet or not meet, but we can't escape it.
Now, many of us have very crazy, busy lifestyles. I know a lot of young parents that are always out there taking their kids to hockey, you know, to figure skating, piano, guitar lessons, whatever, gymnastics. You refer to chaos as our default setting. Why do you think we're hardwired like that?
We find that principle in nature, actually. In physics, we have what's called the second law of thermodynamics. And that law just says that there's this quality called entropy that is always increasing. Now, entropy is just the physics term for chaos. And we find in the physical world, if you want chaos, all you have to do is nothing. Things will become chaotic all on their own. And we find the same thing in our own personal lives. The only thing you have to do to have chaos in your life is nothing. That's the default setting. That's what will occur unless we proactively manage our lives.
Now, human nature shows that we tend to be very selfish as a society. A lot of people say, look out for numero uno, number one. How can we really change that mindset, Doctor?
Well, first of all, we have to saturate ourselves with Scripture. We have to make sure we are have a mind that's filled with the truths of the Word of God. But so much of it has to do with our thought life. The Apostle Paul, Romans 12:2, it says, "Be not conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And it's the mind, and specifically not what we know, but what we think about. In Romans chapter 8, it says, the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. And the Greek word for mind there specifically is talking about our thoughts. And one of the interesting things about that passage is when we look at the literal translation, it says the mind of the flesh is death, the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. It's really saying that we have two minds. And it's not even so much what we think about as which mind we're thinking with. Are we thinking with the spiritual mind? We're thinking through that carnal mind. And if we're thinking through that spiritual mind, it's going to direct us toward agape types of thoughts, which will translate into agape types of action.
Now, Dr. Brownback, I know many people who have been burned in the past from relationships, from employers, and that's why they say they're looking out for number one. What do you say to people like that?
Well, we can look at our past and we can have all kind of terrible experiences, and I'm sympathetic to that. People have gone through a lot, and yet the answer is not to be self-focused. That's just going to increase that person's negative experiences in life. Life doesn't work that way. God designed us to produce agape. If we live for number one, we're going to be miserable.
Now, you have an unusual take when it comes to the term unconditional love. You suggest that it may not be a biblical idea. Why is that?
Well, first of all, when people use the term, what they tend to be meaning is I should love people regardless of the way they treat me, and that's good. That's a biblical concept. But the term itself, unconditional love, the idea that we love unconditionally doesn't work, because every relationship demands conditions. Let's take marriage, for example. Marriage vows, in essence, are a list of conditions. You can't have a marriage if you don't have, for example, fidelity as a condition, or living together, or loving one another. These are essential conditions for marriage. There's a psychologist by the name of Carl Rogers who taught that we should have open marriage, which means you can have relationships with anybody you want. Well, it doesn't work, and what he ends up with is not what God would define as marriage. So today there's a lot of evangelical writing about the whole idea of boundaries. We have whole books written on boundaries. Well, when people write those books, what they're really talking about is conditions. Boundaries are really just conditions, and what they're really conveying is the acknowledgement that conditions are essential.
So why is morality so important to help our lives and society in general run smoother?
Well, because morality we might define as giving other people what we owe them, and unless we do that, we can't have a good relationship. You couldn't have a relationship with somebody who perpetually lies or steals. Just wouldn't work. And likewise with morality, if we don't maintain morality, society disintegrates.
You say it's wrong to extend grace at the expense of morality. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, morality is our foundational responsibility. That's what we owe people. Grace is giving them something that we don't owe them. So we need to give people what we owe them before we start giving away what we don't owe people. If we don't pay the electric bill so that we can give to a homeless person, well, that sounds magnanimous, but if everybody did that, the power would go off, and everybody would suffer. So morality is the foundational aspect of life, and therefore must be maintained first.
You touched a little bit on agape earlier. Doctor, you talk about micro expressions of agape. Tell me more about that.
There's a great passage, 1 Corinthians 16:14. Let all that you do be done in love. That's a powerful passage. And in essence, what it's saying is that everything we do can either be done from an agape perspective or a selfish perspective. We can do one or the other. And that not only includes the big things in life, it includes the tiny little things. It says, let everything you do be done in love. So wife gets up in the morning and you greet her and you can say, morning. Or you can be cheerful and say, good morning, how are you, sweetheart? And so just the way we talk to people, the little things we do for people. There's a story of, true story, Dr. Jerome Motto, who is a psychiatrist in the San Francisco Police Department. And there was a man that left his apartment one night and walked to the Golden Gate Bridge, climbed over the 4-foot embankment, and jumped to his death 200 and some feet below. Well, Dr. Motto went around to his apartment to see what he could learn, and there he found on his desk a note that he had written that said, I'm going to walk to the bridge. If one person smiles at me, I will not jump. And powerful. But we think of just the little things that we can do that can make all the difference in the life of another person.
I've heard that before too. You're right. You smile at somebody, pay them a compliment, a sincere compliment, you can really make their day.
Compliments are one of the great unused resources that we have. They cost nothing. They take no energy. They're actually fun to give. It's nice to be like, well, you look nice today, or well, that was a nice thing that you did, or whatever. It's a great resource, and we miss it by not using it more.
Many people today seem to lack good discernment. How is discernment cultivated?
Well, there's another great verse of Scripture, 1 Corinthians 2:16, which ends by saying, but we have the mind of Christ. And as we saturate ourselves with Scripture, we can develop that mind which will give us discernment to make the decisions that confront us. There's that little wristband, what would Jesus do? WWJD. And yet we have to ask, well, how do we determine that? And we determine that by saturating ourselves with Scripture. And it's not so much memorizing some proof text when we are confronted with a situation of saying, well, what verse applies to this situation? But it's more of becoming so familiar with Scripture that we can think the thoughts of Christ after him.
Do you think we tend to make decisions based more on feelings as opposed to using our intellect? In other words, go with our gut instead of our heads?
Well, it's not just a matter of going with our gut. Our culture today is so tremendously feelings oriented. That's the whole gist of contemporary culture. And so feelings have a tremendously powerful pull on people today. I counseled a woman. She came in first time I saw her, and she told me she had been living with this man and gave me all the reasons why that was a really bad idea and it wasn't working and he was taking advantage of her, and she was glad that she was out of that relationship. She was never going to do it again. The next time I saw her, she told me, well, I moved back in. She said, I saw this movie, and the movie conveyed the idea of follow your heart. And she said, my heart was just with moving back in with him and into that relationship. And so that's what she did. And to me, that just exemplifies our society today. Wherever our emotions take us, that's what we do. We unplug our brain and our will and let our emotions carry us with the tide of life.
Many people would agree, Doctor, that God has a specific role for us to play in life. Any thoughts how we can discover what that unique niche really is?
Well, first of all, we have to be proactive. We have to be intentional. And that gets down to really to the heart of the book. The need to be intentional in seeking what God has for us. And then there's some steps that we can take. First of all, we need to take inventory of the resources God has given us, the capabilities He's given us, spiritual gifts, natural gifts. But above and beyond that, we have a whole lot of other resources. For example, being a citizen of a certain country gives us latitude that other people might not have. The languages we know, the degrees that we have, the network of friends that we have, and so forth. So take inventory of all those things, and then look at those opportunities and see where we can best plug in those resources. I've seen Christians who seeking God's will, and they just spend all this time in prayer, which is a great idea, but they never do any research on what opportunities are out there and available to me that might fit my package of resources. So we need to discover the package of resources, and then we need to look for opportunities, and then we need to spend a lot of prayer to discern where those resources, what particular opportunity where they fit the best.
Dr. Paul Brownback is author of How to Succeed as CEO of Your Life. Thanks a lot for joining me today from North Carolina.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.